My name is David Goyes, and this is the second episode of the Green Criminology Oral History Project. I'm here with Professor Ragnhild Sollund from the Department of Criminology and Sociology of Law, University of Oslo. You have researched different fields from forced migration, labor immigration, police studies, including racial profiling, but of course also green criminology. And in your career, you have received different awards, including the Energy Globe Award in 2015, the Choice Outstanding Academic Title in 2016 for the book Green Harms and Crimes, and then in 2021, the Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Society of Criminology. You also have articles that are very influential, widely cited, including Expressions of Speciesism, and the book The Crimes of Wildlife Trafficking. But before we get there, before we get to how you wrote those articles and books and your influence, I want to learn a little bit about your life story, life history. And I think you have had, and you still have, a very exciting life. And I want to hear how that led you to the place you are now. So we can perhaps start by the formative years, childhood, adolescence. How was your life early on?
Well, I don't know how much I'm going to say about my childhood actually, but I was raised by a divorced mother in the 1960s and 70s, which was unusual at the time. So, and I had a twin sister and an older brother, and we were not very affluent. So my mother was working a lot as a music pedagogue, and I think it was quite an ordinary Norwegian upbringing. I danced, I played music, I was out in nature a lot, and we had our so-called pets, our companion animals. I think from we were around 6-7 years old, and these keeping of animals or companion animals, we had guinea pigs, we had hamsters, we had a dog, Bonzo, and this of course taught me how to love animals, and all the walks in the woods with my mother taught me how to love nature.
And then at some point during, I don't know, your adolescence or adulthood, you decided to go backpacking in Latin America.
Yes.
When did that happen? Why did you do it? And how did that change the way in which you see the world?
I was adventurous, so I decided that after I'd finished the secondary school that I wanted to work for a while and then earn money and to go to Latin America. I wanted to see Latin America. And so I went there for 2 periods. First, I was there for about 6 months. I got ill, I got home, I worked, and I went back again. But what I learned from these experiences of traveling in Latin America, besides getting very ill, I learned that about injustice and oppression. And then I started getting a dedication for human rights. So when I came back, I went to university and I did solidarity work, and after a while I also educated myself to become a translator, an interpreter. So I was translating Spanish for all the refugees that came from South America, mostly from Chile, but also from Colombia and other countries in Latin America, and then. So I was working for an interpreter for these refugees, and then I was offered to go to Nicaragua to work in solidarity work, also as a translator and leading the solidarity brigades. First it was this trade union brigade, and we met with different organizations in Nicaragua for 3 weeks, and I was translating in all these meetings. It was with the president of the parliament, Carlos Núñez, for example. We met with all different kind of organizations, women organizations, all that looked like Nicaragua was going to be a very good place to be in. This was the time with the war with the Contras, and then I Also went back again later for a 6 weeks brigade with the coffee brigade in the mountains of Nicaragua in Matagalpa, and translating all the time, and also of course picking the coffee as the other did, and then I came back home again, did some more studying, and then I was offered a job in a refugee camp in Honduras. And this was a refugee camp for the Salvadorian refugees, just 3 kilometers from the refugee camp over in Morazan. So the refugees from Honduras, they were crossing the border and the river. Many were killed in massacres when they tried to cross the river to get over to the safety in Honduras. And actually the refugee camp, Colmancagua, there are 3 refugee camps. I was in Colmancagua, which was the biggest one. And it was not safe. It was surrounded by the Honduran military. And occasionally there would be attacks at the refugee camp, at the refugees in the camp. So all the internationalists, we were there in order to witness abuses of human rights.
Human shields.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In a way, human shields. So I was there for 3.5 months, also visiting the other refugee camps, San Antonio, which was smaller, and Mesa Grande. And it was a very interesting experience because the Colmancagua refugee camp was then run by FMLN, the guerrilla in El Salvador. So we could see in the evening, we could see that the Médecins Sans Frontières were the doctors without borders were helping patients to cross, and in the guerrilla to cross over from El Salvador into the Honduran refugee camp where they got medical assistance. But it was a lot of secrecy. But it was also one of the best organized refugee camps in the world because it was organized by the FMLN.
So you told me about how in your childhood you were a lot out in nature, you had animals, companions, but it seems like that contact was, or the empathy with animals, nature, it was somehow dormant until later. Or did you also already during this time in Latin America were concerned about nature and animals and so on?
No, not really at that point, because I don't think it ever occurred to me that it would be possible to work with regard to animals and nature. So I was concerned about human rights, and it was first when I was doing my doctor's degree that I started looking into the issue of speciesism and animal abuse.
Yeah. We will get there, but
okay.
Let's start with your academic career. I want to learn how you started, the different studies that you undertook, and how you ended up in criminology.
Okay. This is actually a bit private, but I suppose I can.
You're safe.
Private
space.
I suppose I can tell you. I took criminology as my first discipline. And I was surprised when I took criminology at the time because it was such a really revolutionary discipline. It was very Marxist, the Department of Criminology at the time. We had Nils Christie as our professor and Cecilia Højgaard, others, and it was and what we thought, I was really astonished because how can they permit such a revolutionary discipline? That's what occurred to me because. At that time, everything was criminalized to a very heavy degree. This was during the war against drugs. So I was walking in the street, in Karl Johan Street, the main street in Oslo, and I was walking there with a friend, and we were 15 at the time, and we were just, and then the police one came, and he says, and we could hear the one police saying to the other, "Okay, get them into the car," and then they said to the operator, "We will now bring in another load to the police station at Møllergata 19. And so they just picked up everybody on the street that they thought looked like a bit like a hippie.
Was it in the 80s, late 80s?
This was late 70s.
Late 70s.
This was late 70s. And so these years went on to the same way. So I was arrested several times. Here it comes, after all. I was arrested several times, although I had not done nothing. And I thought this criminalization of youth was really insane, and then criminology was a discipline that really focused on that kind of injustice, so that's why it sort of caught my interest and why I went on with it. And as another intermediate degree, we we did a quantitative study to evaluate actually an institution that is here at the Faculty of Law, JURK, which offers legal assistance to women. So we did an evaluation of that, a quantitative evaluation of JURK in 1984. Yes, and then from criminology, I went on to study Spanish at university, and then I studied social anthropology, and then interpretation. I did some project work, and then I thought that I didn't have to take what is now equivalent to master's degree, because I thought I had enough studies. But then at this time it was a lot of unemployment, so it was hard to get the job that I wanted to get. So after a while I thought that okay, I better take that.
And which job was that?
I was working at the labor office. It was very unsatisfactory and boring, and I'm not a person really to work with people.
That's a paradox there, with so much humanitarian work.
yes, but that was different, and then so I started on the hovedfag in criminology, the postgraduate degree, and then having worked so much with refugees, I wanted to do a study about the integration of female refugees in Norway. So I interviewed 26 refugee women in different places in Norway, and I also and this was also part of a larger research project about refugees integration that was conducted in Trondheim at IFIM, which was the name of the institute, and then I knew a lot about the life of refugees and exile, so this was all along this human rights issues. I think I interviewed women from Iran, from Chile again, and from different countries, and saw all the problems of the exile, what it constitutes, and the isolation, and the declassing you encounter when you become a migrant.
And that was your PhD thesis?
No, this is
that
not
was
my
the
PhD.
master's.
This was, yeah, right, the master's or equivalent to postgraduate degree.
Yeah.
And then after that, I applied to the Research Council in Norway, and I got funding from the basic research to do a doctor's degree. And then I did that on again labor migrants, and not again, but this time labor migrants, and again women, and to see if they had any chance of having social mobility, or if they were stuck. There was this theory by Doringen and Pure that the migrants are, have no other option than being locked up in the lower segments of the labor market. So I wanted to study this, so I did a study in different hotels in Norway, interviewing chambermaids, and also a group of women who had done career, in order to see them as sort of control group.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of interesting findings.
What were the main findings? What were kind of the things that struck you?
Yeah, what was interesting was that there were a group of Filipino women, and they so the two hotels, and they were in the same chain, but they were very different. So I called the one Charm and the other Style. And the women in Charm, they were very steady work power, and they remained there for years and years and years, and recruited each others. But it was difficult for them to get higher positions, because there was sort of this strong social control amongst them. So they didn't want to be the leader of the others. So that meant that they were sort of stuck, but because of their own social control, and not because they were not offered opportunities by the hotel. And the other hotel, at the contrary, there were more options for actually social mobility, because they were not prevented by the social structures within the social environment. So that was interesting, but there were other barriers in terms of language, of course, and they were not socially integrated because there were a lot of nations. So they had social problems within them and conflicts and difficulties of understanding each other. So, well.
And where did that interest in women and migration come from?
I think it's all being raised by a feminist mother, being a feminist in the 1970s. Feminism has always been important for me, so I wanted to see the chances of the women and what barriers prevent women from advancing in society.
And then you finished the PhD, you became a professor here with your work on migration, labor.
Well,
after some...
because I did another project too with labor women. I studied au pair migration to Norway. And that was also from the basic research program of the Research Council in Norway. So we studied global care workers and looked at that. And it's interesting now that I think that au pair migration has not been forbidden in Norway, because there was a lot of what I found was that this is actually labor migration. It's not an exchange program for youth who want to experience Norwegian culture. This is labor migration from the Philippines. But I'm not going to talk about that. I could say a lot about
you can keep talking about this, and also because I'm going to ask you later how that informs your research in green criminology, and if there are any continuities. So you have the word if you want to say something a little bit more about this type of global migration.
No, but because this is injustice at the global level, because these women, the Filipino women, they came from an immigrant country. The Filipinos are traveling from the Philippines to other countries as labor migrants all the time. I actually did not recommend that they ended the au pair scheme in Norway, because it was better for these women to come and work in Norway than it was to go to Saudi Arabia, for example, or Hong Kong, where the working conditions were much harsher and they earned even less than they earned here in Norway. So there were pros and cons about the au pair scheme, but I think while there were risk of exploitation and abuse for some of these women, I think most of them were quite happy actually. But I did some interesting findings. For example, during an interview with two Eastern European girls, I had never put it in my interview guide anything about food. But during this conversation, this thing about food comes up, and it appears that their host families are controlling what they are eating. So while food was part of the salary, they were not allowed to take this or that, or so they went hungry for a lot of the time.
It is some sort of captivity as well.
Yeah, in a way. Although they're, of course, free to go, but still, their residence permit depended on the work permit with the host families. So they were in difficult positions.
Okay, and then after that trajectory, different projects on migration, labor.
Yeah, then this was the last project I did, the last research project that I did on migration. I edited the book, Transnational Migration, Gender and Rights, from that project, and then I did the police research.
Racial profiling.
Racial profiling. I did that actually for almost 3 years.
And that was before becoming a professor here.
It was.
And what was the purpose of that project?
It was well, at the time it was a lot of rumors and a lot of writing in the newspapers that the Norwegian police were racist, and that they were stopping and searching, controlling ethnic minority youth, particularly men, of course, all the time. And so the police directorate wanted to know whether this was right or not. So they funded this project for me, and it was fun. It was really interesting. I was studying in 3 police districts. The police were organized differently back then, so there were 3 police districts that I was studying in Oslo. And so I was driving with the police, and at night, watching them, seeing what they did, how they treated people. I did interviews with the police and sort of trying to verify or not whether they were racist or not. It was interesting. As I explained earlier, I didn't sympathize very much with the police because I thought the police were, I mean, the rumors of the police when I was young was they take people into police stations, they beat them up, they arrested us for no reason, and so I wasn't sympathizing very much with the police. But then I learned that the police, most of the police officers that I rode with and that I interviewed were very nice and very decent, which of course has to do with the fact that many of these police officers now have taken studies in criminology before they attended now Police University College, which makes the Norwegian police the highest educated police in the world. So very well-educated police and very decent police, most of them, but not all. Because I could find that when I was doing interviews, for example, asking, have you ever seen colleagues use or treat people with what you would suspect of being racist? Or have you heard them use derogatory terms or racist terms about the public? Have you ever seen colleagues use violence? And someone said, yes, many times. And I was just, what?
So how do you explain that phenomenon that the people you met are decent, but still there's racism and so on?
Yes.
It seems like it's both. How do you explain that?
Yes, it's both. And I mean the police, during the recruitment process in the police to the Police University College, they try to sort of get out of those people who are not good. But it's hard. It's hard, I think, and some slip through.
So it is from before.
And I also think that people of the old school, for example, one police officer told me that his supervisor up in northern Norway, he had beaten up prisoners at the cell, but they said he's old school, so he's old school. So there was sort of a change, a transition between these young, educated police officers and these old police officers who only took a 2-year police school, and that was paid for. And so it's different. And I think that most Norwegian police, I would say, are decent in my experience.
Okay. And now let's get to green criminology, because this is, after all, about green criminology oral history project.
Because when I did my PhD, and that's when I started looking into green criminology, actually.
All right. Yeah, because my next question was, when you became a professor, based on all the work you had done on migration, policing, and so on, you changed direction, I was going to say, toward green criminology. So when did green criminology or the interest in nature and more than human animals come in your career? It
actually came because during the doctor's degree at the time, which was different, because now it's a PhD equivalent to the PhD system in Europe. At the time, the Norwegian doctor's degree was a bit bigger. And also, as part of the dissertation or part of the defense, you were supposed to present 2 lectures. One was given to you by the committee, and the other one was by your own choice. And that's when I started to look into animal abuse and speciesism. So my own lecture, the one that I chose, was about speciesism. And so I published this article in a Nordic journal first, and when I started looking into it, I was so happy because I found out that there had been written so much on human-animal studies in so many disciplines, sociology, social anthropology, philosophy not the least, but also in criminology. And then I came across Pierce Burns' article from 1999 from Criminology, and I was so happy because I thought, well, you can actually study animal abuse in criminology. And Robert Agnew, of course, also had this article published in 1998. And so I then wrote that article, and then just while I was doing the police research, I also got an invitation. If I want, an invitation that normally considered spam and just delete. But I was younger then, And I thought, okay, an invitation to edit a book. Yes, I want to edit a book. So I wrote them back and I said, yes, I want to edit a book about ecological harms, environmental crimes, and speciesism. And they said, yes, fine. And then I edited the global harms. I spoke with Tim Boket van Solingen in a conference in Utrecht, the European Group Conference. I had my first presentation on animal abuse on that conference, on speciesism. And then that's also when I met with Nigel South through that book, because I was telling my good friend Simon Holsworth that I was editing this book, and he said, well, why don't you ask, and I said, it would be nice to have Nigel South, but I don't dare to ask him. And Simon said, of course you ask him. Of course you ask him. And I asked him, and he said, yes, of course. Of course I will do that, because Nigel is always kind and friendly and enthusiastic. So he wrote the concluding chapter of that book. And then I had Martin O'Brien. I don't think that he has done anything else on green criminology, but his article about the scampi industry is very good, about consumerism, and most of the chapters in that book were about speciesism.
But let's rewind a little bit, because there's still something unexplained, because you were researching still migration policing, and you decided to do one of the lectures on speciesism. Why? How did that thought
Yes,
come to
that
you?
was because I always loved animals. And at the time when I wrote that article, my first article on speciesism, I had 2 parrots at home. Kåre and Line, an Amazon parrot and an African grey parrot, and we had 2 rabbits. And we had a guinea pig, I had another parrot. So animals were very much part of our lives. And I suspected when I looked at Kåre, the Amazon parrot, and Jacoline, that were, I could describe as rescue parrots. I wanted to take them in because I wanted to give them a better life than what I had. They were very miserable where they were. But I suspected from their behavior that they had been trafficking victims. And I was thinking always when I had these parrots that they shouldn't have been in my living room. They should have been out in the jungle where they belonged. So then I started to get interested in I think that's when the idea of studying wildlife trafficking actually surged, and that part of green criminology, and it wasn't done. I don't think that anybody in criminology that I knew of had studied wildlife trafficking then, and what I read about wildlife trafficking was very anthropocentric. It was written. They were writing about poaching, which means that actually it's okay to kill and hunt an animal or abduct an animal as long as it's legal. But when it's illegal, then it becomes a crime. And for me, it was all a crime. So I think my inspiration for studying wildlife trafficking was my own parrots.
And did you find any parallels with the other fields or topics you were researching?
Yes, because it's always about oppression. It's always about abuse. It's always about exploitation. And it's always about breach of rights, whether you talk about human rights or animal rights. So I think that's that's a link between my different fields of study, and that has been all the time.
Okay. So you started and got more and more engaged with green criminology. Of course, you were one of the pioneers. That was early 2000s.
It was actually when my book was in print. Then Piers Bann and Nigel South book Issues in Green Criminology came out. So they were quite close in time. My book was published in 2008 and this book came in 2007.
Okay.
And then I was even happier because that book also contained, an article by Tom Regan, for example, by Rob White, and then I started to connect at conferences, because then it became a good reason for me to go and attend conferences, because then I could meet with the other green criminologists and met up with Rob White and with Piers and Nigel and Tim Bokus van Solingen and many others.
Precisely. So when you were at that stage of your career in Norway, there were some very famous and well-renowned intellectuals, including Nils Christie, Thomas Mathisen, Johan Galtung, Arne Næss. So my question is, what was your interaction with them, if any, or how did they shape your career, if in any way, or what was in general?
I think that I've written about this in an article in Journal of Offended Therapy or something, an article that came I think in 2021, where I trace my own trajectory into green criminology through my basis in critical criminology, because. For example, Nils Christie was very important to me. Arne Næss not that much. Johan Galtung neither. But the professors at the department definitely, and Nils and Thomas Mathisen both. And they, I mean, Nils Christie, he was attending the protest against the development of the Alta Dam in northern Norway. That was a breach of the Sami rights. And so very important for critical criminology, and also then the protection of the natural environment, so I think that for me green criminology is a natural prolongation of critical criminology, and it has always been for me.
And not only their ideas, but their ways of doing academia. What did you learn from Niels and Thomas, if anything?
I think I learned to be an activist criminologist, and not only do my writing, but also participate in public debate. I write open eds all the time. I have made complaints to the Bern Convention for the constant culling of the protected wolves in Norway, and also the killing of wolverines and lynx and bears. And I have given talks in front of Parliament in protests, and so I do this also in combination with my academic work. But I wish, of course, signals that I'm not a neutral researcher. I do research for a purpose. I want to reveal harms and crimes, and I want to sort of point out what leads to these harms and crimes, and I want to show that you can do something about it. And I think that you can move the field very, very slowly, but I think you have to name things for what they are. So it's not a matter of poaching; it's a matter of abduction and killing, or theriocides, to use Piers Burns' word. And we have to be frank about what is happening, and not conceal harmful acts by this deceiving language, I think.
It sounds very much like George Orwell and the political purpose in his writing and the way he focuses on words. But when you started with green criminology, I think it's changed a lot throughout the years, because now green criminology is more accepted, developed, and so on. But when you started, I know there was even more resistance to green criminology. So what was the situation back then? What was the reaction of colleagues and other criminologists?
Yeah. What happened was that I got this position at the department as a professor there. And that made me free to do exactly what I wanted to do. I could finally research what I wanted to research. So wildlife trafficking, I started studying wildlife trafficking, interviewing the police, eco-crime unit, customs organizations at once when I got the position. I was on it, and then, but then of course there were other people at the department, actually not in very high positions, and they didn't like my research field, my topic, and they would both protest against me being employed, and they would protest against my research field. They would come in. I could come into the kitchen. They would say, "Listen, we really shouldn't study animal abuse. That's really not criminological issue. And green criminology, what is that? And environmental harm is not the topic for criminology." So really, some people were very, very against what I was doing, and that was not very pleasant, of course. And that was also why my colleagues abroad became so important to me during this period.
And of course, time gave you reason, because now we are witnessing all this crisis, also affecting more than human animals, climate change, and so on. But you have always been this fierce and strong advocate for green criminology, for non-speciesist criminology, for animal rights. What motivates you to keep going despite all those kind of the resistance?
Yeah, it's the animals, of course. Whether you call them more than human animals or non-human animals or animals, I mean all those animals that are not human, and their suffering. It's hurtful. It's hurtful, and I hate witnessing it, and I cannot witness it without doing anything about it. So that's what keeps me going all the time. And I think the injustice that is done to animals all the time. When people in Norway, Norway is a horrible country in that sense, because we have there's a little minority of Norwegian population that hunts, maybe perhaps only between 5 and 10%. But these people, they are what direct how Norwegians should interrelate with other animals, with freeborn animals. So the hunting lobby is so strong in Norway, and it's allowed to kill, to use traps. It's allowed to kill jays and crows and magpies, and people kill them just for fun. They use them as a blink and kill them for fun, and that's allowed in Norway. And we're living in a nature crisis, and we're losing wildlife all the time, and still it's allowed to kill for fun. And I cannot, for my bare life, understand how people can find joy in killing other beings. I cannot understand it, and I have to write against it all the time. And maybe I'm too passionate sometimes in my writing, and I'm not neutral enough, and I'm not scientific enough, but I think that at least my research is based on rigorous methods. I do my research, but my interpretation, of course, are tinted by my values, and they are not anthropocentric.
And I think that power in your writing has inspired many new scholars, me included, and many others across the world. But I want to ask you about your sources of inspiration. I have seen that you use Peter Singer, for instance, the utilitarianism, Carol Adams, Lisa Kemmerer. Do you have any other intellectuals who you follow and inspired your work?
Yeah, I do, several actually. I find them in philosophy. Not so much Peter Singer anymore, but I read Martha Nussbaum, for example. Arne Han Vetlesen in Norway. I think that he came a bit too slowly to the animal, non-human animal relations field, and saying things still that are quite obvious. Martha Nussbaum perhaps also a bit sort of getting in there now, I think, with her last book. But it's, she says what I advocated all the time, you have to look at the abilities of the animals, what are they capable of? And not only in terms of suffering, but what are they capable of? And I think when you look at other species, then we must stop measuring the animals up to humans and put ourselves on as a yardstick and say, look at what we can do and what they can't do. They don't have morals. They can't plan. And all of this is proven so wrong again and again and again when science develops and you look into ethological studies, where I find a lot of inspiration. Then I think that you can see that let's switch. Let's switch it. Let's measure ourselves up to a wolf. And I say up to a wolf, or up to a goose, or up to a doe, or a cat, and look at what they are capable of, which we are totally incapable of. Does that make us inferior? Or does it just make us different? And I think that I use difference discourse, difference, denial. Use this as an explanation for speciesism. Because they are different from us, we treat them as inferior. Difference, distance, denial, and discourse.
Okay.
Yeah, there we have them. Difference, distance, denial, and discourse. And we have used the difference for centuries and millennia as a justification for treated animals poorly, abusively. And then I think that we have to change that. We have to look at them with respect. We are different, but that doesn't make one superior and the other inferior.
So, you and other pioneers in green criminology also took some time to come to the field of environmental studies or speciesism and so on. What do you think you have gained by doing other topics and researching in other fields before getting to green criminology?
What have I gained? Well, it was interesting research. I think all the research I've done has been interesting, including one study I did. Actually, the study where I interviewed refugee males, men who had committed homicide and rape, and interviewed them about why they had committed these kind of crimes. That was one of my first research projects. And I learned a lot about violence, I think, from that project, for example. I have learned about oppression, about rights. So I learned a lot about different social phenomena, I think. But if I should be totally honest, I would say I should wish that I was 30 now and entering into green criminology and had a lifetime of doing research in green criminology. That would have been so much better than facing the end of my career.
Well, with other people have also done the same and explored different fields. And I think by researching other topics, they learn to see the world in a different way, and then they apply those concepts
Yes.
when doing green criminology.
Yeah.
So I think that might also be productive.
Yeah, that's true. That's true because for example, there are I just read this student exam now. They try to sort of sneak in references that is clear that they haven't used, because I'm in one of my works I'm using Sykes and Mazda to discuss the techniques of neutralization and denial in animal abuse. And then the student writes that Sykes and Mazda say that people use the techniques of neutralization to defend animal abuse. And I said, no,
Okay.
no, they didn't do that. They didn't do that. But anyway, that's an example of a theory that can be employed in studying green criminology, of course. And for instance, I had many interesting conversations with Stan Cohen before he sort of pulled away from me, because he didn't like my studies about animal abuse. He liked me when I was studying human rights abuses and female refugees, but not so much when I was starting to study animal abuse and animal rights. But his theories of denial are interesting, particularly in the study of animal abuse and environmental crimes, I think.
So some 2 decades or more have passed by since green criminology was established in the Anglophone world, and 2 decades since you started with green criminology and animal studies. How do you see the field, the status of green criminology today?
I think it's so promising. I think it's wonderful with all these very interesting PhD theses that are coming out. I see that green criminology is spreading around the world, and people who are starting their careers with a lifetime, they have the lifetime, you have the lifetime to do green criminology studies and contribute to the field, which is so urgent just now, more than ever. And I think that we sort of have to keep the two thoughts, that we cannot only try to protect ourselves from climate change. We have to also look at the nature crisis and how these two are interconnected, and how we can really work against both of them, because I mean, they are so interconnected and they are so big, and the way that sounds like Donald Trump now, wording in the wording, but anyway, how animals and wildlife and suffer from the climate change, losing the habitats, and we have to look at also in solidarity, because it's not only it's humans and it's non-humans that are losing their habitats. If we can talk about habitats, we're talking about humans.
Of course. Even when green criminology has expanded, there are still things to research. So what are the gaps you identify in the field?
I have this research proposal that I have written that I am waiting for an answer to, and I really want to do that research because it follows up on the Crime and Trap project, Criminal Justice, Wildlife Conservation, and Animal Rights in the Anthropocene, where you did your important work on the ban and CITES, David, and it goes more in detail into two aspects of what I say, colonial criminology, and then also non-species criminology, and also wildlife conservation, because we have the zoological gardens and we have the trophy hunting companies, and both these kind of institutions claim that they work for wildlife conservation. The trophy hunting companies and the trophy hunters themselves say that we kill animals and contribute to conservation. And the zoological gardens say that yes, we contribute to conservation. At the same time as they are trafficking wildlife all around the world from different zoos, and they are killing surplus animals in the zoological gardens, like the giraffe in zoo in Copenhagen that was tossed to the lions. And I mean, so this goes on, and I really want to do with good colleagues empirical research into zoological gardens and the trophy hunting industry to see how this plays out, and to look at the way they legitimate these practices and these institutions, and the narratives they use to present it.
It's very interesting that you're still interested in global flows, and now among zoos and botanical gardens and so on. So my last question is, what are the themes that cut across your career?
What are the themes? It's interesting because in a way, in the project I'm working on now, and justice, which is about transitional justice in the green shift. I sort of returned to Nils Christie's participation in the protest against the Alta Dam development and the abuse against the indigenous people in Norway, the Sami, because we are now studying how these green development wind turbine projects in Finnmark in northern Norway destroy the livelihoods of the Sami people there. So I'm going on field work now shortly to talk with the Sami to know how they experience this process, and the topic for this is then the abuse of their human rights, but of course also how this affects the truth and reconciliation process that is going on in Norway between the ethnic minorities, the Sami, and the national minorities, and the state. So in a way it's a loop, but if I should get this other project, I will do both. And then I will look at a combination of the human rights abuses and the animal abuses.
So abuse and injustice has always been what interests you?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think you can say that.
Okay, so thanks for the interview. It was very interesting.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.